Ever since I was a kid, all I wanted to be was an explorer. Sail the seven seas, find new worlds.
But Uncle D, everything's already been found.
What? Like everything?
Well, yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, so much for that. But if I can't be an explorer, I can still be an adventurer. So I bought a motorhome and I'm hitting the open road. My name is Dustin Porter, and this is Destination Adventure.
I have a story for you guys, and it's not a very good one, so buckle your seatbelts. I have been having some troubles here. At the end of the last video, I was just finishing my trip in Kincolith, which was a great trip, and heading north from there. I made it as far as Kitwanga, actually exactly where I'm staying right now. And woke up in the morning, went to fire up the motorhome, nothing. Tried my bypass to fire off the house batteries, still nothing, so I knew probably a starter issue. Crawled underneath, whacked the starter, fired up right away.
Okie dokie.
So I know I need a new starter, which is not a big deal. They're relatively inexpensive, easy to change, but that meant going back to Terrace. So off I went, and rolling into Terrace, I noticed that the motor was making this strange whining noise.
What a whiner.
And the whining was changing with the RPM, so I knew it was something on the belt system up front, just praying it wasn't a water pump. Going through my diagnosis, unplugged the alternator, and the whining went away entirely. So I knew alternator's on the way out, so I'll grab one of those too. And I called all around Terrace, and nowhere had it. I called Kitimat, Smithers, and nowhere had them in stock. The Napa in Terrace told me that he could check the inventory for Napa all across British Columbia, and he said the only place that had one in stock was in Vancouver. So that meant 3 days shipping. So I told him go ahead and order it, and I figured I'd go to Prince Rupert for the 3 days, so at least I could do some fishing and see the people that I know there. So off to Prince Rupert I went.
Another one.
At this point, the alternator was able to run the engine still and charge the engine battery, but it was not charging my house batteries. And I know that because I was always getting this low voltage warning on my inverter. So everywhere I stopped was having to run a generator. And I have two generators here. I have my onboard generator, which is 5,000 watts, way too big for just charging batteries and stuff. And then I have a small little non-inverter generator, just a cheapy 1200 watt generator. And I fired that one up and was running for a couple hours in here. Then my lights on the ceiling lit on fire, as well as I have a mouse deterrent thing that plugs in. That also lit on fire. So I know I was having terrible voltage coming out of that generator. And I know it's not advised to run a non-inverter generator anyways, because it's really dirty energy coming out of there. So then I was left with having to run my big generator every day for several hours to charge my freezer batteries, because it is now full of food. And finally, then 3 days later, got the call. My parts were in Terrace, so fired up the motorhome, back to Terrace I went. Pulled the alternator off, went to put the new one on. Completely wrong alternator. Nothing about it was right. So I took it upon myself then to phone the Napa back in Prince Rupert, and for whatever reason they had one in stock. So put my old alternator back on, returned the one that I bought, and back to Prince Rupert I went. At this point, the alternator stopped working entirely, and my voltage went right down to 11 volts and was dropping from there. And I knew I probably wasn't going to have enough battery to make the trip all the way back to Prince Rupert. It's about 140 kilometers. So I fired up my big generator and was driving with the generator running and the engine running, just trying to put enough juice back into the battery to get me there. And lucky enough it did, but just barely. When I started again, I had to use my bypass off the house batteries. But I went up to Napa, picked up the alternator, everything looked good. Came back down, removed the old alternator again, went to put the new one on. Again, wrong alternator. But this one was way closer. The only difference was the brackets that actually mount to the motorhome. So I went back, I brought both alternators back up to Napa, and he didn't have any alternatives for me, but I figured maybe I could take both of them apart, combine them, and build one functional alternator. He kind of didn't think it was going to happen, but I told him I'll just pay for it, and all I need is tools to disassemble it because it had specialty nuts and bolts on it. So he said, yeah, go ahead, you can use whatever off the shelf. Huge thank you to him. He actually helped me disassemble it and everything. So really nice guy there at the Napa in Prince Rupert. Then I took the housings down to Johnny's machine shop in Rupert, and they pressed the old bearings out, put in brand new bearings for me, and they didn't charge me for the bearings or for the labor. So huge shout out and huge thank you to the guys at Johnny's machine shop in Prince Rupert. Then I went back up to Napa like 10 minutes before he closed, put everything back together, put it on the motorhome. Here it is, check it out. The Frankinator. Half new alternator, half old alternator. Fingers crossed. If this doesn't work, just gonna set the motorhome on fire and walk away. Okay, I think it was just a bit of a hiccup. When I first fired this thing up, it was super weak, like, I don't know, 10 or 11 volts for about 5 or 6 seconds. And then all of a sudden, bumped right up to 14, and now it's sitting right there. That is a good, functioning, charging alternator. What a relief for me. So then finally I was able to continue forwards, but I was left now without a generator to run while I'm doing my editing and charging my batteries, because I'm running a big powerful laptop in here for doing my edits, and it chews through the batteries, so you kind of need a way to charge. And my solar panel system's very small, so it doesn't keep up quite the way that I need it to. So I had to bite the bullet and buy myself a new inverter generator. I never go new with things. I always buy stuff used, but here in the Northwest, all these communities are so small that I didn't really have an option other than to go new. And I actually had to dip into the Patreon account to afford all of these, because I mean, it was $400 in fuel, just all those trips back and forth between Terrace and Rupert. So I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons, and I want to talk about that for a minute, because a lot of people ask, where does the Patreon money actually go? And I'd like to be completely transparent about that. I have a separate account that anything I generate off of Patreon goes directly into that account for any emergency situation. And luckily I've never had to dip into it. But when you're traveling in a big motorhome like this, especially in remote places like where I go, if you have an emergency or a problem, it's potentially thousands and thousands of dollars. So I always want to have that account there just in case. And luckily I've never had to dip into it. But for this one, I did. All of these purchases, it was just too much for me to handle all on my own. So I finally dipped into that account, and a huge thank you to you guys. You kind of saved me here. Without having that backup and that support, I would have had to probably pause my season and go do some freelance work, and now I'm able to just continue on forwards. So a huge thank you to all of the folks over there at Patreon. I'm hoping that I have all of my bases covered now going forwards, because for the next 1,500 kilometers, there is nothing. There is no parts stores. There's a few little villages, maybe 100 people, a couple hundred people, so I can at least get gas and stuff, but there's nowhere for me to get parts and stuff. So yeah, hopefully everything just goes smooth going forwards from here. But I just wanted to make a video to kind of give a big thank you to all of my patrons and supporters, and thank you to everyone that helped get me out of this pinch here, and just kind of let you guys know what's going on. And the next video will be hopefully another good adventure video. But thanks for watching, everybody.